Alright, what is going on everyone? Kronkie here and welcome to the first episode in my Rayman 1 speedrunning tutorial series. Before we get started, a couple things I would like to mention is that first of all, this tutorial is not going to go over everything. We already have beginner guides out there for this game, so this tutorial kind of assumes you already know the basics of Rayman 1 speedrunning, and instead it's going to go in depth on more of the advanced strats in this game. Secondly, this tutorial is not necessarily always going to be going over the fastest strats. Instead, it's gonna go over what I consider to be the best strats, as in the strats that I think are most worth going for. Now, what are the quote-unquote best strats are not always universally agreed upon by the whole community, but that's what makes it fun, right? But yeah, this is my tutorial, so you're gonna be getting my strats. Alright, with that all out of the way, this first episode is gonna go over the forest, and let's just get started. Alright, so the first strat I'm going to talk about is going to be the Betilla Plum strat. And this is not going to be a hard or complicated strat by any means, but the reason I do want to talk about it is because it is pretty much the perfect way to show off the very basics that you're going to need to understand for all the Plum strats in this game. Now, when we say Plum strat, usually what we are talking about is walking on top of a moving plum to basically gain extra speed. So the way we do this, and I do have my visual cues even for strats as simple as this one, as we are approaching the plum, right as Rayman walks over this pink little flower, that's where we jump. And as soon as Rayman reaches the peak of his height, that's when we punch. And then right as the plum is about to land on the floor, that's when we do a jump punch, and then you want to make sure you land on top of the plum and let it drag you to the right before jumping off of it again. And try to do all of that without ever letting go of D-pad right. So now that we know the very basics of Plum strats, I'm now going to teach you a much more complicated one, and one that actually saves a decent amount of time. And this is what we call the Screen 3 Plum strat. The way this one works, and I do have more visual cues, if you see the rocks in the background, right as Rayman is about to walk into the middle part of those rocks, that's where we want to jump. And then as soon as he reaches the peak of his height again, that's where we punch. And now you want to keep holding punch and also start holding jump again. This is going to cause Rayman to auto jump as soon as he lands. Right after this auto jump is when you want to let go of both jump and punch. Now you want to get the cage, but you can't do a jump punch and you don't want to hit the plum. So the way to do this is you have to wait until the plum has bounced up again, and that's when you want to quickly punch twice while still holding D-pad right. Now during the cage animation, it should look something like this, where the plum is right above Rayman. Then after this, you want to walk slightly more forward before then jumping and then doing a punch with a slight delay between each of those inputs. Now the timing of this is what you're really going to need to get a feeling for, but when done properly, Rayman should then land on the plum that is now moving pretty fast. You then want to keep walking to the right, and right before you're about to walk off the right side of the plum is when you want to do a small jump. You should then land on the left side of the plum, still holding right. You want to walk to the right side of the plum again, and right before you're about to walk off again is when you want to do a quick turnaround, punch, and then walk off on the right side. It might look like you're going to get hit by the living stone, but when done correctly, this shouldn't happen. From here, the fish should then hit the plum on its way back. You then want to try to quickly jump back on the plum. And then you want to keep walking right, and right before you're about to walk off again is when you want to do one more small jump. The plum should then bounce on the little platform under you, so you can land back on it again. And from here, you can jump to the vine. Now it should be mentioned that this strat might not always work out the way you want it to. Especially at the end, it is a little bit inconsistent, where what might happen is that the plum overshoots the platform and lands in the water instead. In this case, your best backup would be to try to land on the right side of this small platform and then jump punch the living stone on the right and then make your way to the vine that way, which does lose a little bit of time, but is still much faster than not doing the strat at all. Now instead, if you are lucky, what can also happen is that the plum will land on this little downward slope here, and this will actually give it an extra speed boost, which will cause it to overshoot even further and land on the second platform. And if you can react to all of this quick enough, you can actually be fast enough to skip the piranha cycle. And usually I don't get this, but when I do, I just consider it to be a nice extra bonus. The next strat is going to be another plum strat on screen 3, and this is what we call the middle plum, and this one is pretty simple but a little precise. So the way this one works is when we are walking right here, right as Rayman walks over the horizontal little edge of this platform, that's where we do a full jump. Then right as the living stone spawns in, that's when we want to punch. You kind of got to get the timing down for that. But then we jump to the next platform, and before we land we do a punch, and you want to make sure this punch does not hit the small living stone. Before we then land, we also want to start holding jump, so we do an auto jump, and then after this auto jump is when we want to keep holding jump and also start holding punch. So the fist will then hit the plum on its way back, and Rayman will start auto punching this plum, which will send it flying. We can then jump on the plum and save a couple of frames that way before dropping off. The last strat on this screen and level I want to talk about is what we call the end plum. For this one, we want to jump right at the edge of this platform. Then we want to keep holding jump, and right about at the peak of Rayman's height again is where we also want to start holding punch. Then after Rayman has punched this plum twice is when we want to release both jump and punch. Then right at the edge of this platform is where you want to jump again and then punch the plum mid-air. You then want to dodge the hammer and land on the plum. After this, you could just keep walking to the right to already save time this way. If, however, you want to do the second harder part of the strat, you want to punch basically right as you land on the plum. Because the plum is moving up, your fist should then hit the plum if timed correctly. From here it might help to stop moving for just a little bit, and then you want to try to get the plum to land on this horizontal part of the platform before the slope. If it lands on the slope, it will kill the plum speed and this ruins the strat. If done correctly up until this point, you should then be able to just do 2 quick little jumps, and after the second jump you want to make sure to land on the plum before touching the vine. From here you should be able to just keep holding right until you hit the end sign. Before hitting the end sign you can try to punch the cage, but you'll most likely end up missing it. This shouldn't be a big deal however, as you should easily be able to still get this cage on the revisit. And that concludes all the strats on Pink Plant Woods. The first strat for Anguish Lagoon I want to talk about is on the boss fight, and this is what we call the Bzzit Double Hit. For this strat, right after the first hit is when we want to have Rayman facing left and have him positioned about right in the middle of this left tree. Positioning isn't that precise, but right about here should be perfect. Then you want to watch Bzzit as he's going to do this little animation where he quickly looks to the left. Right when he does this is when you want to punch and then jump. Rayman should then get hit by Bzzit, and this will allow the punch to hit Bzzit on its way back. The next trick is spread out all throughout the next screen, and this is Autoscroller Manipulation. The way this works is there are these invisible triggers that change the scroll speed. The ones that make the screen scroll slower, you want to hit those as late as possible, while the ones that make it scroll faster, you want to hit those early. The first one is right at the start, and this one makes the screen scroll slightly faster, so you just want to be holding right as you're entering the screen to hit this as early as possible. The second one is the most interesting one. This one is going to make the screen scroll slower, so we're going to want to be on the left side of the screen to hit it as late as possible. Now, as you can see, this is normally as far left as we can go. However, there's a little trick we can do here called the Bzzit press. After getting this cage, we want to let Rayman get stuck behind the cage platform. This platform will then push Rayman further into the left side of the screen. You then want to quickly move up out of it, and you want to be very careful as getting stuck there for too long will result in insta-death. From here, you don't want to move Rayman's horizontal position until you've hit the trigger, which should be right after this last spiky fruit. The next one will make the screen scroll faster again, so you want to be all the way on the right side. This one you hit right after you pass the platform with the anti-tunes on it. Then you want to stay on the right side because the next one will make the screen scroll even faster. This one is on the section with the hammers. You hit it basically right as the fourth hammer appears on screen. The next one is another interesting one. This one will make it go slower, so you want to be on the left side. You're also going to want to be at the very top of the screen. Right after hitting this one, you instantly want to move to the right to hit the next trigger as early as possible. The visual cue I use for this is I wait for the P behind the hunter to appear on screen. Then starts the long section where Rayman is going really fast. The last one is weird. This one will slow it down before putting it to a full stop. For this one you don't want to be all the way on the left side of the screen. Instead you want to be about in the middle. For this one you really need to get the timing down, as right when you hit this trigger you want to instantly move to the right to hit the end sign as early as possible. The key here is to not bonk on the right side of the screen because this will kill your momentum and lose time. The closer you get to bonking though, the more optimal you are. We now move to the next level, which is the Swamps of Forgetfulness. The first screen to talk about here is screen 2, and this screen is pretty crazy in the sense that it has so many strats that it all kind of blends together. For that reason I will be talking about this screen as if it's one single strat. Right at the start you want to do a jump punch from the very edge of the starter platform. Make sure you do a full jump. Your fist should then knock down a plum onto the Livingstone's head, and then you want to land on top of it. When a plum lands on the Livingstone's head, they do this sort of knockback animation. When your landing is timed properly, you can sort of get this plum strat effect where it kind of boosts you to the right to save some frames. From here you just want to jump to the next plums at the top of the screen. We then jump down from the second plum and you want to make sure you knock down the plum on the right. You then want to do a simple plum strat by doing a jump punch and walking on top of this plum. You can then jump through the floor of this next platform. Then, right as Rayman walks over this little spot of dirt is when you want to do a small jump punch to hit the plum. You then want to fall down on the left side of the plum, and right before you're about to land is when you want to quickly punch the plum and then turn left. Then take the damage boost and keep walking to the right until you're at the upper part of the platform. This is where you want to quickly punch the plum and then jump punch to get the plum to land as far in the water as possible. You then want to land on the lily pad. Then immediately jump off the lily pad and land on the plum. When plums land in water, they have a little bit of a delay before they can start moving. If we want to be optimal here, we want to make sure we land on top of the plum before this delay is ended. We then want to ride the plum until we hit this trigger that spawns in the next cage. We can hit this trigger a little bit early by jumping towards it, as long as we make sure we land back on top of the plum. From here we just want to jump and get the hang on the platform above us. Now, as you're walking down the slope of this next platform, right as you hit the bottom of the slope is when you want to do another small jump punch to hit this next plum. You then want to keep holding right as you're falling down. And right after the plum is bounced is when you want to start holding both jump and punch. This should cause Rayman to hit both the plum and the cage. During the cage animation you want to make sure you keep holding jump. And after this Rayman should land on top of the plum. From here you should be able to do a full jump and punch the next plum at the top of the screen. You then want to land on the small lily under you. And right after you land you want to do a jump punch towards the plum that's falling down. You then want to land on this next lily and do another jump punch to hopefully get the plum to land as far in the water as possible again. And then you want to land on the plum. Now go to the very right side of the plum and start charging your fist. While charging your fist, also start holding D-pad left. Now right when the cage on the right side first appears on screen is when you want to release your punch. Rayman should then instantly turn around and your plum should start moving left. Now comes the fun trick. If the previous section was done optimally, we should be able to catch an early cycle here, but it's very precise. The swinging plum above you, you should be able to jump on it as it swings to the left. You then immediately want to jump off it towards the end platform at the top right. Before jumping for the swinging plum, I highly recommend you to turn around the plum in the water to the right, so you can still land on it as a backup in case you fail the early cycle. On the next screen we have two strats, the first one being what we call the fast plum. For this strat we try to, you guessed it, get a fast plum. Now getting a fast plum here isn't always that consistent, but I do have a setup for it that basically maximizes your chances of getting one. Here's how it works. You want to be holding jump as you're entering the screen to immediately jump on this plum. Then from the plum you want to jump up to the vine. The way I like to do it is start on the right and just do 3 full jumps on the vine. From the third jump you want to go left towards the things. This is where you should hit the trigger that spawns in the cage. Then you want to hit the plum before you land, and when your fist returns is when you want to hit the cage without jumping. This only works if you have a gold fist. Then keep holding right, and right after the cage animation is when you want to punch the plum. Then keep walking to the right. Right as the plum is about to land is when you want to do a jump punch. Then land on the plum. From here you can do some extra backwards punches to try to gain some extra speed. Our next trick is a camera manipulation. In this game, cycles can be manipulated simply by turning around the camera. I'll be giving you a visual representation to hopefully give you a good idea of how this works. Let's take a look at this map. The area in between the green bars represents the area that is on screen. The blue areas represent the off-screen areas where cycles will still be loaded. Let's see what happens when we play this part normally without doing any manipulations. The cycle of the swinging plum is going to get loaded in very early. Because of this, we're going to catch a bad cycle where we have to wait a long time before we're actually able to jump on the plum to progress. Now let's see what happens if we do a quick turnaround in the right spot. If we turn left just on the right side of the magician and let the camera pan all the way left, as you can see the swinging plum will fall outside of the area where cycles get loaded. This will cause the cycle to reset completely. From here we can proceed to the right and catch a much better cycle. Although it should be said that this cycle is pretty precise. The way to do it is you want to make sure you land on the very left side of this last lily. From there do a full jump to land on the plum. We're now on the last level of the forest, and this is Moskito's Nest. On this first screen there's 2 more plum strats, the first one being Plumskip 2.0. I'll be teaching you the slightly faster version of it, also known as Plumskip 2.5. For this strat, after getting the first cage, as you are approaching the plum, right when Rayman walks over this tiny yellow flower, that's when you want to do a jump punch. You then want to make sure you keep holding jump and punch until you've hit the plum. Then you might want to stop moving for just a little bit, and right as the plum is about to land is when you want to do another jump punch and then land on top of the plum. From here you can just sit about in the middle of the plum for a bit until you're about to pass this little tall vine flower thingy. That's where you want to start walking off the plum on the right side. You should then immediately land back on the plum, and from here you can just try to time a jump to get the ledge grab on this small platform at the top. The next strat that comes right after is the Kronkie Plum, and this is a pretty hard strat. The small platform we ended on after the previous strat, we want to do a full jump off the very edge of it. We then want to time a punch so it hits this next plum. This is pretty precise. Then after we land, we want to do a small jump to get over this anti-tune. Then immediately a jump again and punch this plum mid-air, then make sure to land on the plum. Now move to the right side of the plum and just stay there for a bit. Right when the plum bounces after it passes this little pit of water is when you want to start holding right and do a small jump. You then want to land back on the plum, and now you just want to stay somewhat on the left side of it. Then when it bounces right before passing this little tall vine flower thingy is when you want to start holding right and do a small jump again. And land back on the plum and keep walking to the right, and right before you're about to walk off is when you want to do another small jump. And before you land, do a quick turn around, punch, and then land, and then walk off the plum on the right side. Your fist should then hit the plum on its way back. You then want to jump back on the plum. What you're hoping for here is that the plum will bounce on this little downward slope, because this will give it the extra speed boost that you need for the rest of the strat. If you did everything right up until this point, after landing back on the plum, you just need to keep walking right until you fall off. Because of the plum speed, you should then be able to immediately land back on the plum and keep walking right, and before you're about to walk off again is when you do a small jump. And then before you land back on the plum is when you want to punch the lips of the flower tentacle. This should allow you to walk straight through it. Then right when the plum is about to bounce on the floor is when you want to do a jump. Then land back on the plum again, and from here you should be able to jump towards the end platform. Before you get the hang, you want to make sure you punch the first anti-tune. Then from the hang, jump over the second anti-tune, and if you're optimal up until this point, you should then be able to do this precise jump where you jump over the last anti-tune and hit the end sign before the anti-tune does. Now you're definitely not always going to be able to get the plum to land on the downward slope, and in this case there's still a nice backup you can do that only loses a little bit of time. For this backup, after you've jumped back on the plum and notice you missed the slope, you just want to keep moving right on the plum and do 2 small jumps. And before landing after the second jump is when you want to punch the lips of the flower tentacle. You then want to walk off the plum on the right side. Then right on the right side of the flower tentacle is where you want to stop moving for a second, and right as the plum is about to bounce on Rayman's position is when you punch. You then instantly want to move to the right and then try to jump on the plum. From there you should be able to reach the end platform, but this way you just won't be able to get the fast anti-tune cycle at the end. At the very start of the next screen we have a strat called the 1 cycle, and this strat is pretty precise at first but very consistent once you get the hang of it. For this strat you want to be holding left and jump as you're entering the screen to immediately jump on this first tree. From there you want to jump to get the ledge grab on this second tree at the top. This is where the cage should spawn in. And after the ledge grab you immediately want to start holding right to drop down, and from the bottom tree you just want to do a small jump and punch the cage before you land. The important thing here is that you're optimal up until this point. If you are, then after the cage animation you should be able to just drop down to this next lily without jumping. Then keep holding right and jump off the very edge of this lily and punch the living stone midair. Then keep holding right and jump off the very edge of this next platform. You should then barely be able to land on this next lily. Now once again jump off the very edge of this lily, and for this lily it also means staying on it while it's already moving to the left. You should then be able to land on the next lily, and from here you once again want to do a full jump off the very edge of it. The rest of the lily part shouldn't be all that precise. A quick side note for the strat is that if you happen to die on the screen and need to redo the part, you can also catch the cycle by just holding right as you're entering the screen, and you don't need to do the part where you're spawning the cage first for the cycle to work. Next on the screen we have a strat called the Underpunch, and this is a risky strat. Some would even say a stupid strat, as it's very precise, only saves frames, and failing it will result in instant death. But if you get the timing down for it, it can definitely be consistent. This strat has to do with these spring flowers. Walking on them gives you the plum strat effect, where they drag you to the right and basically increase your movement speed. Because of this, ideally we want to land on them as far left as possible and stay on them for as long as possible. Now normally the way we would play this part is we would jump over the spiky fruit, but as you can see we land pretty far on the right side of the spring flower. Because of this we don't really get to benefit all that much from the plum strat effect. So instead what we can do is, after jumping over this previous spiky fruit, we keep holding jump, and holding jump while dropping off a ledge will actually delay Rayman's drop down. This alone however won't be enough yet to reach the spring flower, so all we also have to do is a very well timed punch. Rayman's punch animation will extend this collision box just wide enough to land on the spring flower, and from there we should be able to get the maximum benefit of this plum strat effect. The next strat is another camera manipulation. This one's pretty simple. As you can see, if we don't do any manipulations, we're going to be too late for this swinging plum, and then we have to wait a whole cycle, which loses a bunch of time. So instead, if we do a quick turnaround right after we pass this little vine, and the positioning isn't even that precise, we should then be able to catch a much quicker cycle for the swinging plum. The last strat on this screen is the Plum Cage, and this is everyone's favorite strat, and by that I mean it sucks. But the setup I'm about to teach you I would say is the most consistent setup for it. So the way this one works is as we're approaching the spiky fruit, right when Rayman walks into the pink flowers in the background is when we do a full jump. And at the peak of his height is when we punch. You then want to land in between the hunter and the spiky fruit without getting hit. Then you wait for the hunter to lower his gun, and this is when you jump punch the hunter. Then you want to punch again mid-air and make sure you overshoot the plum. Then duck as soon as you land. Your fish should then hit the plum on its way back. This is when you want to start facing left. Then right when the plum flies over you is when you jump punch the plum and land on it. Make sure you don't get hit by the spiky fruit here. Then you just want to keep walking left, and right before you're about to walk off is when you do a jump. And right when Rayman's horizontal position lines up with this pink little flower on the floor is when you want to punch. You then want to land back on the plum and start ducking. Your fish should then hit the plum to kill its momentum, and when everything is timed correctly, the plum should then land on this very small downward slope. From here you want to stand on the very right edge of the plum. This is when you want to try to time a very precise jump punch. This is the hardest part of the strat, but when timed correctly, you should then hit the cage, and after the cage animation you should be able to go through the floor. On the Moskito fight, there's two more double hits we can do. Timing wise, these are basically the exact same as the Bzzit Double Hit, where we punch right when he looks to the left. Positioning wise, if you see the black leaf on the floor, I try to stand basically in between these two spikes on the left side of the leaf. The first one is right after the first hit, just like the one on Bzzit. For the second one, right when he does this big purple fruit cycle for the first time, you actually want to make sure not to hit him and just jump over him. Then he's going to repeat the purple fruit cycle, and after the second time is when you do hit him. You then want to go to the left side of the screen. Then after this next hit is when you can do the next double hit. The last strat I'm going to talk about in this episode is going to be the Betilla Rings strat, and this gives me the perfect opportunity to talk about the important basics of ring strats, as there's going to be many more of these later in the game. Most ring strats in this game are made up out of two different types of tech, the first one being speed locking and the second one being ring climbing. If we were to play this part normally by just holding right during this ring section, what we could see is that every time we release from a ring, Rayman's speed gets reset to normal walking speed. This is where speed locking comes in. Now it might be hard to tell, but during the swinging animation we actually have a lot of speed. If we were to simply hold D-pad up instead of right, then as soon as we release from the ring we get to keep the speed that we had on the very last frame of the swinging animation. Generally speaking, the longer the tether, the more speed you're gonna have upon releasing. Now let's talk about ring climbing. From playing this part normally, what we can also tell is that every time we release from a ring we get a little bit of a boost of height. This can be used to our advantage. We of course release from a ring by pressing jump. If we were to already be holding jump before we even grab the ring, Rayman then instantly releases the ring on the very first frame he grabs it and still gets the height boost this way. We could even keep holding punch to make Rayman start auto punching and keep gaining height as long as he keeps hitting the ring. Now let's put it to practical use. From the hang on this platform at the left we can jump towards the first ring. We can then do a singular ring climb to gain some extra height. Then horizontally position yourself about right in line with this first ring. Then you want to time a punch to hit the second ring. You should then get a big tether. Then right when you're about at a 30-degree angle is when you want to let go. You should then get a lot of speed and hopefully enough height. Then as soon as you vertically line up with this last ring is when you want to start ring climbing by holding both jump and punch. This should allow you to reach the end platform. And that concludes all the strats in the forest, and with that we've reached the end of this first episode. Now this took me a very long time to make, so if this tutorial was helpful to you in any way, shape or form, be sure to let me know, as that will be my biggest motivator to keep making these for the rest of the game. Now with that all being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.